You're listening to Chem Stories, a podcast series created by people with lived experience of P&P chemsex.
Hello, my stars. Welcome back to the Chem Stories Airlines Community Lounge. This is your pre-boarding message from Captain Patrice. Before we depart for our second destination, YUL Montreal, to meet with the people with lived experience of P&P chemsex who reside there, we asked all our beloved guests, including Éric, our fabulous host, the central question at the heart of this podcast series. Why is it important for people with lived experience of P&P chemsex to tell their stories in their own words? These conversations will set the stage for the next flights, the forthcoming episodes. Please have your boarding pass ready. Should you encounter turbulence while listening to this podcast, please refer to our list of resources and services related to chemsex in the episode description and on chemstories.ca. Thank you for choosing Chem Stories Airlines, where the journey is always a trip. Chem Stories investigator Olivier in conversation with Montreal host Éric from the Solidarity Flight.
Chem Stories is a lot about sharing stories, and what we really want to achieve is what we aim for is for individuals with lived experience of chemsex to share their stories in their own words. And why do you think that's important?
When we share ourselves about what we are going through, we don't edit it. It's more complex, it's more nuanced, and it's more real. So we get the whole picture, not just a part of it. And especially when you multiply those testimonies, then you have a kind of a bigger picture of what is chemsex. You don't only have one voice, one way of looking at it. Because, for example, my way, I know I'm very recovery centered. Of course, this is my journey. Go through recovery. But I know some people are having chemsex, enjoying it. They want to keep doing it. And I think this is so important that we hear that, because for a long period of time, this was my reality also. So when you multiply the voices and when people say it in their own words, then it's not a specialist talking about a reality he hasn't experienced. It's really this kind of real deal of what's going on, and we get a better grasp. And if we get a better idea of what's happening, then we can adapt the resources, adapt our way to be there for people. It's important for the people sharing. I think I said, it can be very important for the person doing it. So only this is amazing. If sharing in a podcast helps you in your own journey with chemsex, job done. I mean, this is already a good excuse to make a podcast. But then a lot of people are going to listen to it and maybe get influenced by it, and then this can have an impact on the community and sparkle other things. So this is extra. But for me, just the idea that maybe one person will be helped by it is great. And if it's the person sharing, even better. Yeah.
Montreal host Éric in conversation with Mikiki from the Creativity Flight.
This podcast is all about why it's important to hear people who have a lived experience of chemsex talk themselves about what they are going through. And I wanted to maybe know why you think it's important.
Stories of people who use drugs are still predominantly told by people who don't use drugs or people who have stopped using drugs. And I want to use this opportunity to say I still use drugs, and I will continue to alter my mind and my mood, as I think is one of the kind of things that shapes human experience, like whether we take a coffee or an aspirin or crystal meth or ayahuasca. These are all ways of altering our consciousness and our relationship to our mind and our mood. And that for me is an important and very sacred proposition. And when we value or place a positive value on certain substances and certain ways of shifting mind and mood, and deprioritize and stigmatize and criminalize others, especially around chemsex, where for so many people I know that had a historic disconnect from their sexuality, from being able to put their desires into the world through their bodies, not feeling able to or allowed or like that is accessible to them. Drugs are a really great, easy way to find that connection. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think this is important. Also, doing drugs didn't make me a better person. I was a good person because I wanted to do drugs. And I try to navigate that like redemption song kind of story that can go along with substance use so frequently. And I feel really thankful to get to have this conversation and feel like this conversation with you all in particular, and to be able to have it and feel like respected and also like encouraged and valued in this. Yeah, that's the thing for me is like I'm interested in complicating our views on people who live in areas of our social world that are marginalized or discarded. I'm interested in shining a little bit more light and kind of complicating those things in ways that are apparently like super non-linear narratives and abstracted. And I think that those are opportunities for us to have discussions. Yeah.
Montreal host Éric in conversation with Gabriel from the Creativity Flight.
So, Gab, I will just ask you this question. Why, Gab, is it important for folks with chemsex lived experience to tell their stories in their own words?
I think it's important for folks with chemsex lived experience to share their stories is that, yes, we all have like a common like thread to our stories, but in each of our commonality, there's specificity. And I think those specificities and those nuances are what makes like this like mosaic so interesting and so diverse and so important. Like my story is my story. It is truthful to me, but it can also be true to someone else's story. Is their truth too, you know? So it's not like there's no right or wrong. There's no like, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. I feel like I myself followed my truths, and I'm following my truths every day and my instincts where I should go following my story with chemsex, and someone else's will be completely different. And I try as like a sober person doing the 12 steps to also not demonize drug use as itself, even if I could. Sometimes I tend to do it because I come from an environment where I suffered a lot from others' addiction, and I still suffer today from others' addiction. But I try to kind of like welcome people in their own experiences, and I try to kind of like be flexible and be curious about others, even if sometimes it's confronting and it's hard because it kind of brings me back to hurt or trauma. But I feel like if everyone can feel safe sharing their own stories and let go of the shame, I feel like that's the most important. That's the way it should be. Like, I feel like shame is like the first enemy of any marginalized community or drug addicts or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And if we could only let go of that shame, stigma, the community of drug users or drug addicts or however you want to call them would like start healing faster, better, and we could live like a more accepting society, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think that by everyone sharing their own experiences, like unique experiences, it kind of creates this more diverse scene and more variety of stories to tell, because my story is not the only story.
Montreal host Éric in conversation with Hugues from the Heritage Flight.
The main question of this series of podcasts, like Chem Stories in English, is actually why, for you, is it important to share your story in your own words, and why is it important to hear the story of people using chemsex in their own words?
I think it's important to share my story and hear the story of others, because I think we need to talk to each other more. First, I think that's like, it's been said a lot that chemsex is about connection. And I think like we do share our stories when we are in those kind of settings. And it is really a way of connecting and seeing the diversity of life path and reasons and recoveries, and to remember like everything that has driven our community. And I think it's really true with HIV too. Like I've heard people talk, like people who survived through the heart of the epidemic, people who like don't know why they're alive. They were like early, like seroconverted people in the 80s, but like people live to tell. So yeah, I think it's important to build trust around it. Don't be ashamed to be open, and also to like tell new stories. Also, I think regarding HIV, again, maybe I'm a little bit biased because I've worked more on HIV than chemsex itself, but I think we lack new story of queer people having hardship around those issues. Like we don't hear a lot of young people talk about their HIV. We've heard almost nothing about chemsex, and we know it's so much of a big thing in our community. And I understand why there's so much stigma around it, that people are less willing to tell their story. But it's really important because a lot of people will see themselves using or not, like because the hardships are similar, are shared. And in the end, it will be building that kind of connection we seek through chemsex, I think. I think also, like, as queer people, we aren't taught how to be queer. Mm-hmm. It's not something we learn in school. It's something we have to seek, like how to be queer and what is our shared queer history. And I think it's important to create that memory because like our memory has been censored and silenced so much. That's why we have like kind of a fragmented archive. And we've done fabulous thing with this fragmentedness of our archive, but like if we can fill in the blank sometimes and offer some narratives, like the diversity of narrative to people who need to hear it, I think that's important.
Montreal host Éric in conversation with Jean-Sébastien from the Heritage Flight.
Why is it important to talk about chemsex in our own words and in our own lifetime, I guess? It's important for many reasons. For me, this has changed throughout the years. So it's been 6 or 7 years. I forget, I'm not keeping track so much anymore. But it was important at the beginning for survival and just to make sense of it all and being vocal about it, being communicative and using speech allowed me to piece it together and to come to peace with it and to remove the shame and just to make sense of it and embrace it as a life journey, as something that I had went through, learned from, took with me and passed on to other people in terms of recovery. So that was the first initial movement. Then it became kind of a responsibility I felt to my community and just keep talking about it. We're still not talking enough, so keep talking about it. And there's a legacy piece to it so that we don't forget. So I don't forget that I'm also human, that I was also very vulnerable at a certain stage, that I'm not perfect, that I can experience pain and experience difficult emotions and go through things and recover. It's also a reminder that I can do hard stuff. I can go through hard eras of my life. I have proof that I can survive a lot. So it's also a testament of my own strength and my community strength. It's funny because every time I'm asked to participate in one of these or to give a talk or whatever, I'm always like, oh, do people still want to hear this? Like it's been for like, I feel a bit outdated because it's been so long. I'm like this old guy talking about chemsex, but then I get this reaction. And I'm also like, we live in the era of narratives. Like everyone has something to say and a story to tell and everyone's doing something in front of a camera. I'm like, am I really participating in that? Then I get humble about it and then I do it. And then someone walks up to me in the street and says, that podcast, that talk you did really resonated. It allowed me to whatever. And then I'm like, oh yeah, don't get jaded about this. Keep doing it because it does have an impact, whether it's positive or negative, who knows? And I don't know who's going to listen to this tonight, but someone out there needs to hear your story. So if you're comfortable with it, work through it, tell it.
Montreal host Éric in conversation with Michael from the Plurality Flight.
So why for you? Let's start with Michael. Why is it important for for you that people with chemsex lived experience get to tell their stories in their own words?
I mean, I guess because there's a million different lived experiences and everyone deserves to, like, feel like they have someone to, like, relate to, or, like, they don't feel like they're alone in their experiences. And, yeah, I guess it can feel, like, super isolating to have, like, a niche experience. But, like, in reality, there are going to be other people who have had the same things in their lives or can relate in some aspect, and like that could be super helpful to them.
And you shared at the beginning when we started the episode that when you were younger, you wouldn't see anyone like you. Like you didn't have any models, so you didn't. And so just that I think is so important. Yeah, having models, and we don't know how people will relate to our stories. We never know, even if it's niche.
I think like personally, I went through my chemsex experience very alone. And it's not something I really like shared with a lot of people in my life. And I came out of that alone too. And I've like never been to a meeting. Like I've never had any type of like community around it, which honestly probably has to do with like being trans in a lot of ways too, because I felt like I couldn't. Like, I don't know, like or my experience was not the same, or like not as bad, or like I didn't feel like I deserved to like take space or whatever. But I think even just like the people that I've met who have had similar experiences and like being able to like have those conversations with them has like made it feel a lot less isolating too.
Montreal host Éric in conversation with Ali from the Plurality Flight.
And for you, Ali, why do you think it's important for folks with chemsex lived experience to tell their stories in their own words?
I guess for me, education is very important. So if we're able to express our realities, yeah, I agree with Michael. There is someone else who's going to relate with you. But also, I guess we're starting a conversation that could have in the future beneficial results for the whole community. Just to give you an example, for me, when I was first asking for help, I had to manage like the hormonal effects and adding the drugs effects. So imagine an adolescent that just starting puberty and is using drugs. At some point, he's going to be lost. So for me, that's one of the reasons, because especially in the trans communities, we go through a specific situations, either during the medical transition or the social transition, that are very specified. So if you're able to understand what are the consequences of the drug use during those states, as I think you're going to be able to support in a better way the trans and non-binary community, especially being a minority.
Attention all passengers, Captain Patrice speaking. This is the final call for boarding passengers on our YUL Solidarity flight. ChemStories investigator Olivier will introduce Éric to share his journey and perspectives on PNP chemsex in Montreal. Cabin doors are closing. More fascinating stories await. Subscribe to stay informed about upcoming episodes. If you've encountered turbulence while listening to this podcast, please refer to our list of resources and services related to PNP chemsex in the episode description and on chemstories.ca.